Stocks had their worst day in a month today. The losses for the Dow were nearly 1%, more than that for the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. The reason? Well, investors seemingly don't like a functional Congress as much as they said they would. Now, how's that again? Well, as we told you last night, congressional Republicans and Democrats agreed, amazingly days ahead of Friday's deadline, on a budget deal that will stabilize fiscal policy for the next 2 years. No government shutdown, no brinksmanship. But the problem, according to market swamis, is that all this congressional comity removes a very important barrier that some say had kept the Federal Reserve in the stimulus game. Barrier out, taper in, maybe as soon as next week. Kind of makes you long for gridlock, doesn't it? Well, here are the final numbers for a very chilly day on Wall Street. Today, those blue-chip Dow stocks fell 129 points. The NASDAQ ended lower by 56, even briefly dipping back below the 4,000 mark. And the S&P 500 was down 20.
More now on that proposed bipartisan budget deal reached by lawmakers. Two things. It doesn't raise taxes, but it restores some of the across-the-board spending cuts in the sequester. The House is expected to vote on the deal tomorrow. Eamon Javers joins us now from Washington with more on all of this. So, Eamon, tell us more about what's in the deal. Will it pass? And are Democrats as divided as the Republicans?
Well, here's the key to the deal. They're taking about $63 billion of those so-called sequester budget cuts, scrapping those and replacing them instead with $85 billion or thereabouts in longer-term budget cuts. So net-net, the deal proponents here say that this is a $23 billion improvement in the nation's deficit picture over the life of this particular deal. Now, the Speaker of the House and other leaders on Capitol Hill very much support this deal, and the Speaker was asked today what his reaction was to some of the conservative groups who've already come out and opposed it. Take a listen to Speaker Boehner.
You mean the groups that came out and opposed it before they ever saw it?
Yes, those groups. Are you worried that
They're using our members and they're using the American people for their own goals. This is ridiculous. Listen, if you're for more deficit reduction, you're for this agreement.
Speaker Boehner there, very outraged, you could say, about these conservative groups outside the Republican conference, neutral groups in Washington, D.C., opposing this deal today. But not all of the members of Congress who emerged from the briefing today said that they agreed necessarily with Speaker Boehner. Even the Republicans who came out of that briefing today, a lot of them said they're going to oppose this deal. Take a listen to some of this dissent as well.
It is the typical end-of-the-year deal I've seen for my 3 years up here. It's going to increase spending with the promise of spending cuts sometime in the future. At the end of the day, it's going to increase the deficit. It's going to raise taxes and fees, and it's not going to address the long-term overspending problem in Washington.
So, guys, that's the bottom line. When you've got compromise, not everybody is going to be happy. Back to you.
All right, so, Eamon, why are members of Congress now so seemingly willing to strike a deal when just 6-8 weeks ago they were so eager to fight it out?
Yeah, that's one of the big questions here. Big turning point was that government shutdown that seemed to have really scared off Republicans from this idea of pushing for another one early next year. They seem to be burned by the poll numbers there and willing to come up with a deal. Although they're going to lose some votes on the Tea Party side, they might be able to make it up with Democratic votes. If they can get enough Democrats to go along with this thing, the expectation is it'll pass.
Always fascinating to see this process in Washington. Thanks so much, Eamon.
That's right.
Eamon Javers reporting from Washington. And here's one top bank executive who was happy with what he heard from Washington. He said he's, quote, thankful that lawmakers reached that tentative budget deal, preventing another possible government shutdown. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said, quote, this budget deal is a big deal because we don't have to go through that crisis again. Dimon also said he's less worried now about the impact of the Fed scaling back its stimulus plans.
Joining us now to talk more about the latest developments in Washington and what it all means for the markets, the economy, and your money is Greg Valliere, Chief Political Strategist at the Potomac Research Group. So, Greg, welcome, number one. Is passage of this not-so-grand bargain really a done deal? Is it a sure thing? And what if it doesn't pass? What will the market reaction be?
It's pretty likely, Tyler, but nothing is ever certain in the House. It's a close call. I'd say it's probably a 55 or 60% chance that the House will approve it. If they don't, if there's a big upset, a big surprise, I think the markets wouldn't be happy because it would show once again that Washington is broken, and no one wants to see us go back to the dysfunction and incompetence that we saw during October.
Greg, do these short-term fixes really accomplish anything? I mean, we still have uncertainty about what's going to happen for the next step, the next go-around. There's not really a long-term solution. And so it still prevents people from going ahead, or businesses from going ahead and investing in the future and helping the economy or making, job hires. So do these short-term fixes really work?
I think this is a very big deal, Susie, for this reason. We don't have to mess with this for another year and a half. This deal takes us until October of 2015. So for taxpayers, for businesses, for Wall Street, there will be some sense of predictability, not the ridiculous dysfunction that we saw for the last 2 or 3 years.
But the market seemed to like the ridiculous dysfunction, Greg. It had a great month in October.
It did, because I think the markets correctly ascertained that we were not going to have a default crisis. And I think now we can say, in retrospect, we know that the economy began to turn around. And I think the improvement in the economy is a big story. It may not be a good story if you just follow the Fed and worry about tapering, but I think the economy is coming back.
So the subject now for Wall Street has gone from, no more worries about this budget thing and worries about the Fed taper.
Yeah.
What's the word in the Beltway about which way things are going?
It seems like every few days the chances of tapering starting next week improve. We have a budget deal, despite its imperfections, so that's a source of uncertainty that's been removed. Tomorrow we get a retail sales report, and if that shows some strength, and I think it might, that would be another reason for the Fed to begin. So it's now just a question of when. Maybe they wait till January. I don't think they can wait much longer than that, but it's coming, and you have to ask the question, is it fully in the markets? I'm not sure.
What was interesting in this budget deal, or proposed deal, Greg, to me, were two things. One, that it goes straight at the cost of living adjustments of military pensions, and it also makes some changes to federal pensions, namely that new workers, I guess, are going to have to pay a higher percentage of income to participate in those pensions. That feels to me like the camel's nose in the tent of entitlement reform.
You're right, Tyler. It's a baby step. Put your toe in the water, whatever analogy you want to use. But yes, we have to begin the assault on entitlements. We have to curb entitlement growth. This begins to do that. It may take the next presidential election to really go after entitlements, but it's coming.
All right. I was going to ask you something about the entitlements, but let me ask you this way instead. For next year, 2014, what is going to be the big issue, the big debate in Washington?
I think now we free up some time. We're not going to have to debate about the budget all the time. And by the way, the deficit is going to continue to fall, and fall pretty significantly, because receipt growth will be a pleasant surprise. So now we can talk about immigration reform, tax reform, a lot of issues that may have been in the back burner had we not dealt with the budget. Now we get a chance to debate these.
And of course, what we all know, Greg, is that the big story in Washington today is that the Redskins benched their quarterback. But we'll save that for another day. Greg Valliere.
They should bench the owner.
Chief political strategist at the Potomac Research Group.